In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This story is entitled The Hourglass of Second Beginnings, a timeless love story of Jess and Young-soon written by Jesus Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. In the city that never stopped coughing neon, a musician found an hourglass on the sidewalk one night. It lay between a lamppost buzzing with moths and a manhole breathing steam, as if it had been waiting for someone with ears tuned to the ache of hours. The glass wasn't cracked, but the wood carried scratches, the kind of scars you get from being passed through many hands. He picked it up, brushed grit from its frame, and then the sand inside glowed faintly, as if every grain remembered a sunrise it had once reflected. Curious, he took it home, set it on his windowsill above his battered guitar, and when he flipped it, the hourglass didn't just tick. It sang a hushed chord, faint at first, then swelling into a melody that had curled around his room. Without thinking, he began to strum along, the notes weaving into an old refrain. If I could save time in a bottle. The song was not perfect, but the hourglass didn't demand perfection. It bent the air, stretching seconds like taffy, holding them still so the music could unfurl without being rushed. Neighbors paused on the stairwell, feeling the strange suspension, hearts beating in rhythm with something they couldn't name. By morning, the hourglass stopped glowing. The musician left it on a cafe table and never looked back. Objects like that never stay with one person. They find the next soul who needs them the most. And that's how it came much later in the rest of the attic of Jess and Young-soon's house, waiting patiently in a bed of blankets, ready to teach them that time does not have to be rewound to be redeemed. It has to be held, turned gently, and listened to, like a song you never tire of listening. The city was bruised with dawn when Jess stepped into the damp. A gauze of mist lay over the streets, softening edges, wires, road paint, and roof awnings barely awake, until everything felt halfway dreamed. The first jeepney rattled past with its tiny speaker whispering a love ballad from the 90s. A cat blinked from the pharmacy roof like a lantern learning how to glow, and then he buttoned his jacket against the residue of night and joined the river of commuters, angling toward the station, each carrying a private weather inside their chest. On the platform, a boy practiced dribbling an invisible basketball, and then there was an old woman counting prayer beads in the color of tea. Jess stood under the digital clock and watched in seconds flick away. He caught his reflection in the train's black window when it slid in, hair rebellious from sleep, tie not quite straight, eyes framed by a fatigue that he wore like an undershirt. The door sighed and he stepped inside. The carriage smelled of rain and metal. Condensation ghosted across the glass. A bouquet of umbrellas leaned like reeds in a crowded riverbank. Just touched the phone in his pocket without pulling it out, as if the gesture might be enough to conjure a message from Young-soon, and the train lurched. Then the people swayed in unison. He hummed softly, private, 3 notes she sometimes sang for him in the night when he tried to swallow the day. Not the whole melody, just a thread to hold, a man in a security uniform that nodded as if recognizing some invisible anthem. At the next stop, a cluster of students poured in, smelling like paper and sugar. Just edged toward the door when a woman with that tape up box could pivot, and then in the city passed in wet strokes, overpasses, billboards, neon halos burning out into the morning. He traced a line on the fogged window with his knuckle. Why? Then wiped it away quickly, as if the train itself might laugh. Across the city, Yongsun laughed first. Stage B wasn't really a stage so much as a square of tape lines on polished floor, but when the pianist hit the vamp, even the fluorescent lights felt like an applause. Again from the second verse, the director called, and Yongsun turned it playful, swinging a wrist, lifting a bow just enough to make the chorus wink. The ensembles' voices rose, bright and ragged with rehearsal. She ad-libbed an extra flourish that made Min, the baritone with shy shoulders, break into a grin midline. Cheater, Min said, as the chord landed and their laughter leaked out like a breath from a balloon. Improviser, Yongsun corrected, bowing theatrically. She sipped water and stretched the kink in her neck. For a heartbeat, the chatter blurred into a mural of sound, footsteps, piano squeaks, someone trying to fix a stubborn steeper. And then she reached out into her coat pocket, the way you press a bruise to make sure it still hurts, and touched the folded note Jess had given her years ago. The creases had turned the paper into a small map. The ink had bled once into the corner, a tiny island of blue. And then it said, "Come home to me." She let the words warm her palm and slipped the note back into its cave. Young Hejin called from the wings, waving a paper bag. "Tiok bribery for the bridge section." Yongsun took a piece, soft and chewy as a cloud. "I'll consider not sabotaging your high note." "You already sabotaged my dignity," Hejin said. And they beamed at each other, two conspirators, pretending life was only this rehearsal and not the ache of other rooms. By the late morning, Jess had threaded through a day made of small frictions. The hallway smelled like coffee trying to be brave. He juggled emails and spreadsheets where numbers sat in obedient rows like soldiers with clean shoes, then took a call with a client who mistook warmth for weakness, until Jess reminded them gently but unarguably that kindness and clarity often arrive holding the same hand. He texted Young a photo of a crooked paper star someone had pinned above the copier with "Found our constellation in the office." No reply, rehearsal. He knew, but the act of sending felt like planting flag. The sky grew bored and shed a thin rain over the city. When the lunch crowd thinned, they stood by a window and watched the droplets race. He mounted forwards, not even a whole line. "Stand by me, darling." Then smiled at his reflection for being sentimental enough to need it. In his pocket, a different note, Yongsun's handwriting slanted and sure. "You're allowed to want gentleness." He folded and refolded the edges until it was more charm than paper. Rehearsal stretched its back and yawned into the afternoon. "We fight the bridge, we respect the key change, and we do not enjoy the pianist," the director decreed. Again, and they obeyed. Yongsun's voice loosened into something effortless but intentional, the way a river looks like grace, even as it pulls at stone. During a break, Min confessed his terror of missing the cutoff. Yongsun tapped his sheet music. "Let the breath count for you," she said, "and don't marry your fear," she snorted. "You should put that on a mug." She wanted to text Jess that line, to pin it into his day like a medal. She settled for tucking the thought behind her ribs. Evening sprawled itself across the city. Slippers on, hair down. Just finished an incident report, then a budget summary that pretended not to be a poem. He shut down his computer and the office exhaled. The corridors hushed to to the hum of the exit signs and the leaving last, not for martyrdom, but for the clean silence that allowed memories to speak louder. On the elevator ride down, he closed his eyes and saw Young at 13 different ages, smiling at him once. He said to the empty car, "Almost home," and the house answered. It had its own lungs and used them. A settling sigh as the rain found its gutters, a quick breath from wind shimming the window latch, the faintest whistle through the stairwell as if the air learned how to sing. Young soon climbed the narrow steps to the attic, barefoot, careful, a pilgrim to a private church. The door woke slowly, hinge, complaint, wood yawning, and then sent out a smell layered like a cold old cloth. Cedar, dried lavender hidden in the drawers, and the mild damp of a roof older than its pride. She stepped into dust that did not feel dirty, so much as sweet with remembering. The round window caught a coin of moon and spent it across the floor. Dust motes lifted and dried like a tiny galaxy anyone could afford. She treated the room as if it were alive because it was. The dressmaker's dummy wore a scarf from a spring they had spent making plans of, and it was big enough to be embarrassing. An old suitcase, corners bound in brass, held letters from people they still loved but hadn't spoken in for too long. A cracked frame contained the fairground photograph where her grin looked like the dare and Jess's looked like the promise. The cassette labeled Our Songs that lay half slid behind the basket of yarn. When she lifted it, the spider web lifted too, and she apologized to the spider in case it wanted to file a complaint. Her hand found a wool blanket softened by 100 winters. Beneath it, wood as smooth as something faithful, and she drew it out, an hourglass, plain and patient. Its glass bubbled into an old shape, not ornamental, and the kind of humility that turns everything it touches into an altar. The sand inside looked like the remembered light. She thumbed the base and felt grooves cut by someone else's determination, not to turn back what was lost, but to make precious what still remains. "Hello," she said, because it felt rude not to, and the attic listened. She brushed a film of dust from the frame, and without thinking, let a tune slip out. 4 syllables that had followed humanity to space and back. "Fly me to the moon." The hourglass brightened the way a blush brightens a face. The glow didn't flare so much as wake, a candle deciding it could be a small sun if it needed to. Her phone rattled in silence and Jess's name bloomed. "Wife," he said, and the tin speaker managed to carry the smile. "Husband," she answered, and his name braided the room to his chest. They told each other the ordinary parts of their day. Some people trade relics. He mentioned the paper star. She said she found their cassette, which made him groan because somewhere on its younger self was very sincerely singing off-key. And she said, letting out mischief on the last letter, that she found an hourglass. "Dangerous," he warned. "Times tend to hold grudges. Not a time machine," she said, "a time resetter. The inscription says it doesn't rewind, it makes it precious." "Like reheating fries in an air fryer," he offered. "Only if the fries are our first hug," she said, and they made the sound she loved, laughter ducking on their breath, turning into something that could carry a room. He grew softer and said I was terrible at it. He confessed, "My hands, do you remember? They couldn't agree on a plan." "You were nervous," she said. "I was a storm pretending to be a girl." "And no," he said gently, "you were a girl who deserved an embrace that didn't flinch." She looked at the hourglass and it looked back. Want to try again? Always, she said, and the wood crossed the city with its own light. She turned the glass. The sun did not fall and it pulsed. A hush spread like cloth laid over the shoulders of noise. The attic became a room made of listening. The city outside seemed to step backward to give them space. The phone didn't disconnect, but it no longer mattered where the wires or air carried their voices. The hour unfastened, and they were there, not transported, not erased, but paused in a way that allowed truth to arrive without hurry. Reset 1 just stood, younger by nervousness, if not by fears, his arms over like uncertain birds. Youngson pressed her forehead to his shoulder to give his body a map of where to land. To distract him, he sang into his shirt and barely a line, more smile with notes. Can't take my eyes off you. He tried the joke that collided with breath and died lovingly at their feet. They both laughed, which became the actual embrace, an incident and an accident of joy. And the sand shivered and the image softened. Reset 2, he inhaled first, the way swimmers do before slicing a surface. His hands found the small of her back and then, careful of her breath. And he moved wider, drafting her into a circle he trusted. Better, she whispered, into the hollow where the necks meet shoulder. He smelled of rain and something he could mistake for steel until it became the idea of safety. But you can't do more, she teased, nipping at his collarbone with a grin he could only hear. Cruel, he said happily. Exacting, she said, and the hourglass made a sound like approval, as if the glass can purr. Reset 3's silence arrived as the third person and refused to be awkward. Just did not apologize for wanting to hold, and he allowed the wanting to be clean. Youngsun did not shrink to make room for someone else's comfort. She allowed her fullness to be received, and they found the geometry that belonged to them. His right hand anchoring the plane of her shoulder blade, her left palm finding the ledger of his spine. And then they stood inside it long enough to feel their pulses stop competing. And when she breathed, his ribs agreed. There, she said into his beating, this one. Keep it, he answered, and the sentence felt like a vow that did not need ceremony to make it so. The light stilled, the attic returned, not as if the magic had ended, but as if it had completed what it came to do. The glow retreated to a quiet, satisfied ember inside the glass. The rain outside dappled the roof with the drummer's patience. Come home, she said. I'm already walking, he said, and the city, genuinely conspirational, turned a few lights green for him that had might otherwise have left grudges. He reached their door with a damp collar and a mouth full of the day he had survived. The lock turned, the hinge remembered its training, and there she was in the hallway with her hair unpinned, cheeks lifted by a smile that started long before he arrived. Neither announced the moment. They let it arrive like the weather. The hug this time was not a replay. It was not a trophy from a finished game. It was current, steady, serious, and tender without being precious. Her makeup smelled faintly of flowers. His jackets carried the tired electricity from rain. He thought not even the whole thing, and only the hinge of it. Stand by me, and the lyric did what good words do. It made room for truth. He gathered her in the way he had meant to. The first time, and she let herself be gathered, which is its own bravery. Again, she said, and as she asked into the fabric at his shoulder, the syllables muffled and brighter for it. Again, he said, and then so softly, even the house leaned closer to her ear. Always. They did not part so much as shift configuration. In the kitchen, she set water to boil while he hunted for the last scallions and found instead a lemon he'd brought with an ambition to be better for breakfast. She laughed when he sliced a finger. Not much, but enough to become a story later, and they bandaged it with the pride of a man who had successfully survived his own clumsiness. The noodles softened in the pot. Eggs slipped in with the grace of swimmers who didn't fear the depth. Steam fogged the window. Two silhouettes found the trick of eating with one bowl between them, an old ritual that made hunger look like generosity. "Do you remember our first movie?" he asked. "You mean the one where we both pretended the film mattered?" she said. "I remember the popcorn," he said seriously, "and thinking you were the bravest person in the room because you laughed out loud." "I laughed because you said you were concentrating so hard on being composed." And Yongsun said that. "Your composure's weak." "I was trying to be the kind of person who deserved you," he said, unembarrassed. "You already were," she answered, and the steam carried the line up like a prayer that doesn't need paper. They washed dishes, touching hands more than necessary. A fork escaped and clinked to the tile. She offered a court bow, and he applauded as if the silverware had invented ballet. And when the warm water turned their fingers, wrinkled as old paper, they called it good enough and let the rack do the rest. "Show me," he said, "the attic." They climbed together. The house made the small agreeable noises of floors, remembering footsteps. And at the threshold, he hesitated the way you do before entering a room where something sacred had already happened. She took his hand and tugged him over the border, tour guide and co-conspirator. "Here," she said, touching the shelf as if knighting it. The hourglass. Up close, he saw that the wood was not the plain but precise. Two faint seams, a tiny knot that looked like an eye pretending not to watch. The glass caught moonlight and it didn't hoard it, offering slivers to the boxes and to the trunks, the cassette and the dressmaker's dummy. Just read the inscription. He read it again slower, as if it might be shy and need coaxing. Not to turn back, but to make precious. He nodded kindly. "It listens to song," Yongsun said casually, as if reporting a weather pattern. She hummed the smallest scrap. "Only fly me to the moon," and not enough to tempt lawyers, but enough to tempt blessings. And the green brightened with the bashful pride of an instrument hearing itself tuned. Just set two fingers on the frame. "We shouldn't use it like a crutch," he said, "or I'll become a man who edits instead of lives." "We won't," she said. "We'll only use it when our hearts forget, on purpose for practice, not performance." "Deal," he said, and the handshake was a kiss, and the kiss was a draft for a longer document neither needed to sign because their bones had already countersigned. They settled on the floor with backs to a trunk that smelled faintly of mothballs and passport. Yongsun pulled the cassette player from a cardboard nest like a lyric and coaxed it to life. The tape whirred. The past cleared its throat. A much younger Jess slid into the room off key and adorable. Yongsun's younger voice arrived to rescue him, layering harmony over sincerity, until even wrong notes found work to do. They listened to themselves make something accidentally right. "Keep these," he asked. "Keep all of each," he said, "even the part where you thought a key change was a suggestion." "Key changes are capitalism," he said solemnly. "They demand compliance." She flicked his ear and said, "They demand breath." They were quiet for a while, letting the house be the one to talk. The attic timber giving a polite creak, the distant fridge muttering about duty, and the storm gutter sighing that had been done outmost and would like cake now. When they did speak, the old stories with more texture than plot. How the woman at the canteen called him anak and slipped an extra spoonful of rice, and how men confessed the fear of missing cut-offs, and the nailed one so perfect that the room had applauded without realizing it. Yongsun admitted she sometimes hid in the wings to read Jess's old texts, When the scene refused to open, he admitted he sometimes wrote his emails in the style of her lyrics when numbers felt too sharp. "Will you turn it?" he asked class, touching the hourglass again with reverence. "You reserve for instruments and altars and other people's hearts." "Not tonight," she said. "We're already precious. I can feel it." She placed the hourglass on the middle shelf, not high enough to be distant, but low enough to be casual, and at the level of reach, she smoothed the dust around it, as if setting the table for a fifth guest only they could see. They rose and he offered his hand to steady her, and she took it not because she needed it, but because she wanted to memorize its shape. On the threshold, she looked back the way travelers do when they want the room to know it was done well. In the hourglass glowed once a foxfire and a thank you. Downstairs, they made tea. They carried their mugs to the window with the rain had signed its name in dried commas. The streets had emptied. A motorbike murmured in the distance like a giant, thinking. Somewhere a dog explained the night to another dog, and it was believed. They watched the heavens sharpen until the stars looked like memory pins on a map too large to fold. "Tell me something true," she said, not because she doubted, but because the truth enjoys being invited. He considered. "I no longer want a life I have to escape from," he said. "I want a life that feels like coming back to the same room and finding it larger." She lifted her mug. "Two rooms that enlarge," she said, to our unflinching. He clinked and they drank. The tea was too hot and perfect. They made faces, then they laughed for the simple pleasure of seeing each other's mouths become the shapes laughter makes. And when the sleep came to stand kindly at the door, they followed it upstairs. They didn't turn on many lights. They didn't need to. The house knew their feet and loved them for it. In the bedroom, she curled to him and he to her, two halves of an answer nobody else needed to ask. He thought of his morning reflection, tired man in a glass train, humming to a fog, and liked him better now than this hour had been added to his ledger. Again, she murmured, without opening her eyes. "Always," she said, and the word did what it always does. It planted a flag at the edge of a new country and invited tomorrow to build a city around it. And while they slept, the hourglass kept its small watch. It did not hold time, it polished it. It remembered that sand used to be glass, and it used to be sand, and it used to be light. It held 3 resets like pearls and did not advertise. If the wind notched the roof line, it hummed in sympathy, the way old, good instruments do in the presence of other notes. If a spider finished rebuilding the web Yung Soon had apologized for, it approved of industry without smugness. And if the moon leaned into the round window to gossip with the dust motes, it promised to keep its secret. And in the morning, when Jess would step into the rain to meet the train's mirror, and Yung Soon would step into the light, taped to the floor, and call it a stage, the hourglass would stay where they had placed it, reachable, patient, unafraid of their ordinary, not to turn back what was lost, but to make precious what still remains. Which is another way of saying the hug would keep happening, not as a repetition but as practice, not to erase clumsiness but to give tenderness better tools. On the platforms and in dressing rooms, in kitchen with noodles and eggs, in rooms with windows and rooms without, they would find each other in the same shape again, the embrace that doesn't flinch again and always. In the epilogue, the attic did not stay forgotten one weekend. Just carried up a box of fairy lights while Buell arrived with her toolkit, muttering that any ceiling could be convinced to hold more dreams if you ask it properly. We skipped the ladder entirely, sketching chalk constellations across the beams before anyone else could stop her, and Youngsoon, humming the same tune that had first been woken at the hourglass, unfolded sheets of midnight blue fabric to drape the walls. And when the last round of bulbs blinked alive, the dust motes scattered like startled fireflies, and suddenly the attic was no longer wood and boxes, but a sky indoors. Stars pinned themselves above their heads, too many to count, just enough to believe. And then they lay together on the old blankets, shoulders brushing, laughter drifting upward until it joined the artificial constellations. Just pointed to the glow of the fairy bulb and called it Orion. We insisted it looked more like a dog, stretching. Bure laughed until her stomach hurt, and Youngsoon leaned close enough to whisper, "This is how the universe should feel, crowded with love." The hourglass rested quietly on its shelf, glowing faintly as if pleased to be among stars once more. It didn't need to turn to night. Every second was already a beginning, every breath was another song, and so the attic, like their lives, learned how to shine. Each day, I write and create for my beloved Youngsoon, the sun who lights up my every verse, every tale, every quiet thought I dare to share. If her warmth reached you through these words, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep stories that shine.